Well, good morning, everyone, and happy day after Labor Day. And let me take an opportunity on a belated basis to thank our men and women in labor for their contributions. Uh, it was kind of a quiet day. I was walking around downtown yesterday, and I know everybody was trying to get together with family and labor leaders, but I want to say thank you because we're putting a lot of people to work, particularly with our announcements today. And uh, housing is not just for those we focused on. There's a lot of people looking for housing, including our labor force, and we want to help them as well. I want to say thank you to everybody that's standing uh, behind me, our Board of Supervisors, our housing professionals, our nonprofits, those departments that will help me implement the legislative policies that we're introducing today and we'll be announcing with our supervisors in partnership, and in particular, the residents of the city who represent thousands of people who want more homes and want to make sure they're affordable to them. And that's the focus of today's announcement. Housing that is affordable to low income and middle class families promotes the very diversity that's the value and that is the critical part of our city. Diversity, equity, and economic vitality are all the things that we strive to allow our city to be the great city that it is. And San Francisco is a great city. I know it, and thousands of people who want to be here, and the thousands of more that want to stay here also know this is a city that's a great city. We are using this time of prosperity to make sure that all the residents can benefit. As you know, just last year, with the Board of Supervisors and the public, we raised the minimum wage to the highest in the country. You already saw the first in a number of moves in the next few years that get it to the highest in the nation. We've worked with our private sector and with our city departments to make our municipal transportation affordable. And today, very, very unique from any other American city across this country. Muni is affordable for free to our low-income youth, to our seniors, and the people with disabilities, thus making transportation a great part of our equalizing efforts. And we have invested heavily in our public education. Not just the city's coffers have been directly linked to helping our school district, but our private sector and our technology companies and our innovative companies are surrounding the schools, circling the schools with not only resources, but with volunteerism to higher degrees than any time we've seen before, and that the public-private partnerships are swelling such that teachers and principals and those that support our public school systems have, I think, this unique time, have never felt more, I think, engaged with our city government than ever before. And that is because we've made our kids and our families a very high priority, and we want them to win the jobs of the 21st century. But providing affordable housing to low-income families is an essential part of our affordability challenge. In fact, it is probably one of the most complicated of all the things that we do in government. Because you can't just build the housing that we need. You also have to pay attention to making sure that we preserve the housing that people are in, that we make sure we stabilize neighborhoods that are under a lot of pressure by different economic forces to force people away from their homes, that we have to rehabilitate existing housing to make sure they're up to standards that I used to use to litigate against the Housing Authority when they had bad times, and now we have an opportunity to change all of that. That's why last year I announced a very aggressive goal, a goal that is shared by the Board of Supervisors, and certainly one that we know can be accomplished by 2020. 30,000 homes newly built and rehabilitated and preserved by 2020. and guaranteeing that a third of them will be affordable to low-income families, and in addition to that third, more for middle-income families. I've been called a lot of names, but I do enjoy being called the housing mayor. And even though I may go by many other names, I am going to make sure that the housing mayor sticks, because I'm going to make sure that I work with the board to ensure this housing gets built and rehabbed, and that we do all the other things to stabilize neighborhoods. We are making tremendous progress on these goals already, thanks to the collaboration that's going on with our housing unit, with the building department, with planning, with the nonprofit housing developer community, with the for-profit market rate housing, which you'll hear in detail the things that we're doing to incentivize them as well, and certainly with my partners at the Board of Supervisors. We need to build housing, but we also need to make sure that we are identifying areas of the city, whether it's land or neighborhoods, where we can more quickly build and engage partners more effectively in meeting this challenge. Well, that's why we're here today. We're here to launch a blueprint that you'll see in detail on the screen very shortly. It's a blueprint. It's called the Blueprint to 10,000. And that's basically saying that we're going to assure that of the 30,000 we build by 2020, that a minimum of 10,000. In fact, our numbers indicate to us that we're going to exceed that 10,000. But we want to make sure everybody knows there is a blueprint of specificity to get to these 10,000 permanently affordable units for low-income families. And while we set this ambitious 10,000 affordable homes goal, there's a package of legislation that also represents this blueprint. And when you see this and you hear the support from our Board of Supervisors for these various policies, you'll know that we have an opportunity to exceed this 10,000. With this fall, working with the board, I'm championing 5 pieces of legislation with the Board of Supervisors that will make sure that we reach this goal by 2020. Let me begin with the first piece of legislation, and that's focused on our public housing. You know from my own history that I worked with public housing residents. I was dissatisfied with the centralized, kind of poverty-focused housing authority system that we had. So I've set on a path to convince the HUD, our Housing and Urban Development federal partners, our state agencies, of course, even our local housing enthusiasts, that we had a different vision, a better vision, a vision that would use a program that is relatively new at HUD. It's called the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, short for RAD. It's a federal program that allows us to kind of leverage the financial investments that the housing authorities are using, but design them in a different way to incorporate nonprofit developers and for-profit developers on the same sites to rebuild the housing and rehabilitate them. And this RAD program, in this very first phase, will cause 1,400 units to be rehabbed. That's a cost of about $700 million. And it's the first phase, and it's one that we're introducing because we know that public housing is part of the ladder for a lot of people. And if we don't rehab and allow those sites to create more density and figure it out how to have long-lasting housing that is for low-income families, we'll have a big hole in this effort. So the legislation that we're providing today is basically what we call bond financing. You know, in this era of good economic times, what we're learning more and more, and you'll get used to this, is we'll be introducing financial packages that have everything to do with investment and with leveraging. And in this nomenclature of financial packages, bond financing that allows us to borrow off of public land that is owned by the federal government is a very creative way in using this RAD program. And this money that we'll borrow off will quickly repair and preserve these homes. Now we're doing it with a program called Hope SF because we promised the residents of public housing that it was never going to be done to them, it would be done with them. And Hope SF is about drawing out the residents and their leadership, making sure they understand and appreciate the designs that we have to do with, and all of the surrounding support systems that we have for the residents. Because they know more than anybody else, it's never just about the brick and mortar. It's about investing in the people, and that's why we have training programs, skill set programs that draw on the people that live in public housing so they can participate in the design, the acceptance, and the actual building, and in the new business of the integrated housing that will be managed and run and invited in for those jobs by the very residents who live there. These homes are vital to the well-being and safety of our most vulnerable San Franciscans, and that's why it is the first of the introduction of our policies. The second legislative package that we will be introducing again with the board is called neighborhood preference. Too often, all of us hear about families that are displaced from their homes, their neighborhoods, their friends, and their communities. Losing your home is a big tragedy for anyone, and it's compounded when you're displaced from connections with nearby relatives, with friends, even with your employment. Our new legislation will give existing residents a priority of affordable homes that are built in their communities by giving a neighborhood preference. And that is something that I know the board has been very supportive of. The third policy legislation that we'll be introducing is to focus on those tenants who are displaced. We've heard time and time again, we've read story after story about tenants who are faced with no-fault evictions or Ellis Act, and despite the numerous visits I've made to Sacramento, we have not been able to gain the changes that we want, and therefore, locally, we can do something about the no-fault evictions, the evictions that are based upon demolitions. And so we're going to provide a preference to residents who are displaced because of those causes. The fourth is something that I said earlier, and thanks to the leadership of Supervisors Farrell and Kim and all the others standing behind me as well, we are going to revamp what has been our inclusionary housing program by providing more incentives to market rate developers to provide affordable units alongside their market rate units. And supervisors have been very interested because they know we've had tremendous limitations in the way we've approached the past in terms of inclusionary housing. And what that means is whenever there is a market rate development, whether you see it in Soma or you see it in Viz Valley or you see it in downtown, what we want to do is incentivize the building of more affordable units on the same site. And so we've got to provide that right mix of incentives to make sure that the developers are attracted to that so they can put more of those 100% affordable units on site. It will allow developers to help secure housing for families in rent-controlled units and therefore stabilize those rents in affordable, permanent, affordable levels. The fifth is also linked to that, but it is has a lot to do with what we do off-site, off of those market rates. As you know, obligations flow to developers when they build affordable or when they build market rate housing. We also want to make sure that if we have a program that incentivizes the building of affordable housing off those market rate sites, then we have the right incentives to build more low income and middle income on the off sites by providing a little more height, a little more density, and making sure that it pencils out. So off-site and on-site incentives are part of these packages. And my staff can go into a lot more detail than I can about how this works, but we have been in conversations with the dozens of developers who know that just tweaks a bit here and there on the heights and on density can assist them in making sure their off-site and on-site developments get more play and that they can add more units. We believe that these legislative packages, coupled with the aggressive building and rehabilitating of 30,000 units of housing with a guaranteed third affordable and more, in fact, to middle income, that we're going to exceed these goals. And we know that we'll have a clear roadmap given the blueprint that we're announcing today and the tools that we have, that this is just before us, and we just got to make sure we keep focus on this. And this is what I'm focused on as mayor, and all my staff that has to do with housing is going to be very focused on this so that we ensure that this gets done, not only to benefit the areas that are under construction now, whether it's south of Market or in the Trans-Bay, but we know that these packages will also help stabilize neighborhoods like the Mission and Chinatown and other neighborhoods throughout the city. Finally, I want to make sure you know that one of the most important things for our public to know is what's on the ballots for this November. Prop A is the $310 million housing bond that we have before the voters. And it is a housing bond that has been unanimously supported by our Board of Supervisors with me, and it has incurred the support of now dozens of community groups, residential groups, and it does not raise property taxes. This is a key to our capital planning, and this $310 million will, in fact, provide us with serious resources to not only hit home on the low-income housing, but also middle-income housing and amounts of money that will help build in neighborhoods that we can build in much quicker. It will, and it is, one of the greatest single steps that we can take towards the building of more housing. We've got to make sure that our city is united for the benefit of residents who are telling us on a day-to-day basis they cannot afford to be here. This city has to be united, and I'm wanting to make sure that everybody in my administration knows this is the top priority. We have dealt with so many other issues that help us with the affordability challenge, whether it's transportation, whether it's parks, whether it's schools. We've even got one of the best and most unique programs of starting a bank account for kids going to kindergarten. No other city is doing that, but many cities are trying to do that. So now we have to tackle the affordable housing challenge, and I think this is the way to do it. And certainly in my past housing advocacy, I know that we have a lot of friends who wants to make sure this gets done as well. So with that, I have a great partner in the Board of Supervisors, and I know that each and every one of them have been thinking about housing for the past couple of years and all the challenges it represents. And no greater of a leader than I have than the board president, London Breed, who herself lived in public housing and speak and testify directly to that. But she is 150% committed to making sure that the public housing gets redone, because that's the key. And there's a lot of land in that public housing that has not been fully utilized, so we can incorporate more affordable housing for families that need it. And also they're being built in areas of the city that are really beautiful parts of the city, and you should take a chance to see all those areas that we're building now. They'll become hotbeds of a lot of investments, but we're building the affordable housing there first. Let me invite up to the podium our board president, London Breed.
Thank you. I just want to start by thanking Mayor Lee. I do this every time. We've had a number of press conferences specifically about public housing since I've been on the Board of Supervisors. I met with him when I first became a member of the board. We talked about my priorities, and I made it clear that my priority was public housing, was to make sure that the residents of public housing had the kind of housing that they deserved, that they were able to live in dignity. A lot of the conditions that existed when I was growing up there sadly still exist today. Those residents deserve better, and each and every time we step at this podium and we talk about public housing and what we're doing to make sure that we rehabilitate public housing, that we include the residents in that process, that we continue to deliver services directly to them and we don't leave them out. Every time we do that, we are moving in a positive step forward. So I'm glad that when we talk about housing in San Francisco, when we talk about preservation, that public housing is at the forefront. So that is really important to me. It's important, I know, to many of the members of the board who have a number of public housing developments in their district. Finally, we are moving a step closer to doing what we said we're going to do with this first phase with 1,400 units of rehabilitation. It's going to make a difference in the lives of thousands of residents. And so I thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. The other thing that I want to highlight in part of the mayor's comprehensive blueprint package is neighborhood preference. Growing up here in San Francisco, I've had so many friends leave the city because they couldn't afford it. And we watched, as I grew up, all of the development that happened under redevelopment, all of the housing that, popped up in our neighborhoods, and we didn't have the ability to access it. Yes, we applied. Yes, we were put into a lottery system, and oftentimes our names were not pulled in that lottery system. That's what's changed a lot of the character of these neighborhoods. And finally, when the board introduced legislation for neighborhood preference before we went on recess, what we were saying is that we have got to stop the clock on changing our neighborhoods. We have got to make sure that residents who live in these existing neighborhoods, the reason why we love San Francisco and its diversity in the first place is because of the people of these neighborhoods. And we have to make sure that they are a part of any new development. So this neighborhood preference is going to make that difference, and I'm excited to be a part of the group of folks who co-sponsored that legislation and leading the charge. The last thing I want to talk about, because I know that we're talking about a blueprint and a plan, and I know that some of you know that I am working on a plan for the Western Addition in connection with the Mayor's Office of Housing, Mayor's Office of Economic and Workforce Development, and of course the Mayor, because all of those folks work for him. We have to think about some of the challenges that are just happening in all of these neighborhoods. Preservation. There are people who live all over our city in affordable housing developments, places besides public housing that are falling apart. Some of you read in the news what was happening with Frederick D. Haynes and that issue and how we've had to take those folks to court in order to stop the possible sale of affordable housing development. We have to make sure that as we build new, as we change the city, as we're trying to prepare for all the new residents that are coming here, we don't neglect our existing affordable housing stock. We make sure that their roofs are not leaking, that the mold is abated, that some of the conditions that exist in those places, which are very similar to public housing, are abated, and we have to find creative solutions and develop a plan in order to protect residents who already live in our affordable housing stock throughout San Francisco. And part of what I'm doing is working with the mayor and his legislative fixes, working with the Board of Supervisors, and trying to be creative, not just legislatively. Some things don't always require legislation, but require working with various city departments and community stakeholders in order to come up with the right plan for the community so that long-term we know exactly what the plan is to preserve this affordable housing for generations to come. And so I am excited about this blueprint. It's a step in the right direction, and we're going to make a difference in our housing stock. I know that there are people who are contacting me every single day concerned about what's going to happen to me, what's going to happen to my family, and we are working hard to make sure that we do everything within our abilities as policymakers in order to stop the trend of what's happening in San Francisco today. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, to you and your team, and I look forward to working with you on pushing these legislative fixes through.
It would be very time-consuming but appropriate to invite each and every one of the supervisors that are here, because each one of them are going to be as impassioned and as committed to different aspects of the housing challenge and the affordability challenge. And I'm standing with supervisors who have spent many critical hours on their own talking with residents, not just in their districts, all over the city. And each of them will be I think delivering and adding value to these packages of legislative items to make sure everybody is covered. But I want to just take the opportunity to thank President Breed, but each and every one of the supervisors here today for their commitment on this incredible, complex challenge, but one that needs to be tackled with each and every one of the supervisors, making sure that they're doing their part and working with us in the building and the rehabbing and the preservation of housing. Well, we all have the faces of people who come up to us. And I want to introduce two more people today who will speak very personally to how the city government can assist them in improving their lives and what we have done in the past to help out. One of them is Brian Thorstensen, who himself was displaced from his Dubose Triangle home not too long ago, but has found the benefits of some of our programs, and I want you to hear directly from Brian. Come on up, Brian. Thank you.
Hi. Home. It's a deceptively simple word with its open O, its humming M. Simple but evocative. I've called San Francisco home since 1983, 32 years. I've been a member of the city's arts community since I arrived, first as an actor, then as a founding member of a theater company, now as a writer and a teacher. This will be my 14th year in the theater and dance department at Santa Clara University. For 12 of those years, I also taught in the creative writing department at San Francisco State. In 2014, I was served with an Ellis Act eviction. I was afraid my time in the city was coming to an abrupt end. I'd lived in that particular apartment for 24 years. I moved in a month after I turned 30. I turned 40 in that apartment, then 50. I finished my MFA and lost my best friend while I was living in this apartment. I spent many months in panic, then decided I needed to figure out how to stay in San Francisco. Through the below market rate program of the Mayor's Office of Housing, including their down payment assistance loan program and their Ellis Act Certificate of Preference program, I was able to buy a new one-bedroom apartment. What? As an artist and teacher, owning in the city was never on the agenda, and I'm still slightly shocked. I wouldn't call it a simple process, and here I'd like to say a special thanks to Vanessa Doyle, who always took my phone calls, always answered my questions, and did so cheerfully. But it was a process that worked. I applaud the efforts of the mayor to extend certificates of preference to other members of our community and to encourage developers to build more BMR units on site. My story isn't unique. I could probably tell you 20 different people who are in a similar position that I have been in, easily. Our city's vitality is created by the widest possible range of people being able to say that San Francisco is their home. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. And our final speaker is a longtime public housing resident, in fact, 23 years to be exact. She is educating herself with the city's public housing rebuild, and she's not only been a good leader, she personally has made sure that information that we give out is spread out to even monolingual residents in her buildings, particularly Chinese-speaking population. Let me introduce to you Miss Dorothy Ramey. Come on up, Dorothy.
I'm a little nervous. They're all friendly. Good afternoon. I have lived at 990 Pacific for 23 years. I've been involved with the tenants and the tenant association and have seen problems in our building for some time. The building is 41 years old, and it needs a lot of repairs. It needs a new elevators, it needs new wiring, it needs ventilation systems, fire alarm, and when they do the water. The say what?
Fire sprinklers.
No, no, when the water falls out.
Sprinklers.
Yeah. Those are things. They're redoing our kitchens and bathrooms. Kitchens need new cupboards, better cupboards, counter space, storage space. The social room needs to be redone. Security in the building needs to be taken care of, and that will be handled to some degree in that we will have person on duty 24 hours a day. And I've been working with the new developer who will be taking over our program, Chinatown Community Development Center, who has regular meetings once a month with the tenants, telling them what our needs are, what the repairs are, hopefully the schedule. But one of the major things that has to be done to our building is it has to be retrofitted for a case of major earthquake. It will not survive without one. And it does mean that we will have to boom out for about a year and come back. I must say that Chinatown has really been effective with keeping our tenants well informed as each step becomes clearer and clearer. The last thing they've done is had a slideshow where they gave demonstrations of what the new kitchens would look like, the social room, things like this. They speak, our meetings are in Chinese, Cantonese, Mandarin, and English, so that all can understand. Notices are given out very ahead of time and posted on each one of the apartments so the tenants are well informed when these things are going to happen. Chinatown is doing a really good job at showing us the things that need to be done. I can't say enough good things about them. And I want to thank the mayor and housing authority for really having the vision to come to begin to help have our buildings in safe conditions for the tenants who have to live there. Thank you.
Dorothy, Supervisor Christensen and I will make sure that the whole episode will be as good as possible for everyone, even the temporary move as well. Well, you can hear from both Dorothy and Brian the complications that are behind their efforts to stay in San Francisco and to be a part of it. We're up to the challenge. I want you and the public to make sure that this mayor and the Board of Supervisors will be working hard every single day to make sure these units are built and rehabbed and done in a way in which we honor not just the goal, but more importantly, the people that want to be here. That's our focus. So I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to Dorothy and Brian for your fantastic input today. Thank you to supervisors for taking up the legislative aspects of it, but also working together on implementing, and all the agencies that are behind. Thank you for your making this the highest priority for our city. Appreciate it much, and let's go on and get to work. Thank you.